If the Seven had to deal with the monstrous threats of One Punch Man, could Vort's A-Team keep the boys' verse safe if the Deep Sea King were to march from within their waters? Or if Carnage Kabuto were to rampage through their cities? With the boys back for its new season, let's find out how they'd do in the face of these disasters if they appeared in their verse instead of Saitama's. For this video, we'll be using the established roster of the Seven from Season 1 and treating each monster in isolation as a catastrophic event the team have been sent to handle. Now, onto the tiering. Tiering is as follows. Simple indicates that it's a fairly low effort situation for the Seven, and challenging is for battles which will take an honest effort from the group to some degree or another. Then we have Some Die, which means that while the Seven will be victorious, multiple members of the team may perish in the process, so this is effectively a very dangerous scenario. Either way, it's for situations that are too close to call, or if there's a certain mechanic at play you could argue both ways on. And finally, we have the Seven Loses, which is pretty self-explanatory. These are monsters who are simply too much for the combined efforts of the Seven. Before we run through some of the monsters, let's go with a brief scaling before the latest season. Homelander as the strongest typically scales around multi-city block level to town level at best, with a statement from Edgar suggesting a neutron bomb is capable of being withstood by their safe haven, which is what he uses to stay safe from a potential Homelander attack. There's also the statement in the art and making of the boys, which says Homelander can level a city within minutes, which indicates he's not outright city level, but is powerful enough to cause that level of destruction in a short amount of time, which further lends to the idea of his scaling. Some people think Homelander is outright city level since they believe a statement regarding human weapons not being able to kill him includes nukes, although I don't see where and when Vought would have dropped a nuke on his head to try that. Logically and narratively, it doesn't make much sense for them to dump a nuclear warhead on their best asset, nor does it seem to line up with scaling we've seen pre-Season 5. Combat speed-wise, Homelander is around hypersonic plus at best via saving Butcher from a bomb's vest explosion. A-Train may perhaps be more dynamically agile in speed than him where dexterity is needed on foot, however Homelander should be faster in a straight line through flying. Or that's what I thought at least, until the new season where Homelander couldn't catch A-Train in a long distance chase. As for the rest of them, naturally they scale less than Homelander in physical power and overall speed, however some like Queen Maeve and Starlight can perform attacks to a partial standard, whereas characters like A-Train can be comparable enough at speed in battle. Overall, this means the Seven when working in tandem should scale to around town level with varying speeds up to hypersonic plus in bursts at the highest for Homelander and A-Train and lower for the others. Some of you might think I've been too generous here, and you could be right, but this video is trying to be a little more optimistic for the Seven's chances. And what better way to start than with Crablante? Can we please take a moment to imagine the Seven's reaction when they turn up to this scene, only to find a towering monster with googly eyes who is half man and half crab wearing white underwear? And just as Homelander's about to take lead, the Deep waves his arm across Homelander and says, "Don't worry, I've got this. Crabs love me." Then the moment he gets close to try and talk him down like he's the ocean whisperer, Crablante just smacks him through the air and starts talking shit. Homelander's going to sigh and tell Translucent to go and make sure the Deep's not dead. Then it's going to get messy. While Crablante is certainly tough, his attacks shouldn't be enough to put the likes of Homelander or Maeve at death's door, and his speed shouldn't be akin to anything which would overwhelm them either. With A-Train speeding around Crablante to keep him busy, Maeve and Noir alone would likely be able to break Crablante down and expose his weak areas. This is simple tier, since the strongest members of the Seven could be able to handle him alone, and in a group setting, very easily. An even easier victory for the Seven would be Piggy Banken. This monster is from the bonus chapter named 200 Yen, and is actually one of the first ever monsters to defeat Saitama. Well, a kid version of Saitama, who still had a lot of growing to do, that is. This monster had an obsession with bumping into people and taking any coins they dropped. However, despite being a supernatural miscreant, the police and a special unit worked together to bring it down not long after. This monster is a fairly weak one, so even the Seven can breeze through here since monsters able to be defeated by police and police adjacent forces are not going to be an impressive level. Simple victory for the Seven who keep the residents of their city from losing their loose change.
Money, please!
So far, so good. And it's only getting better for the Seven since we have Tongue Stretcher next. This perverse, lizard-faced monster is a wolf-level threat. Even at this lowest level, 5 grown men were unable to overpower a fodder-level monster such as Tongue Stretcher, who shrugged them off like you'd expect a prime cane would to a bunch of toddlers. However, the 7 are not such pushovers. With enhanced or super strength being almost guaranteed in many soups from the boys, the majority of the 7 are likely physically stronger than this monster, and given how quickly he gave up in the face of King, he's probably not the kind of monster who is good at putting up a fight in the first place. Tongue Stretcher won't have the chance to show Queen Maeve what that mouth do, since the 7 would crush him rather easily, which lands him in simple tier, and a few could do it on their own. Martial Gorilla, however, knows a thing or two about fighting. Capable of defeating A-class hero Heavy Kong, Martial Gorilla is a knife-wielding primate garbed in military gear. Considering some A-class heroes are around hypersonic in combat speeds and can reach even small town level potency in attack, as demonstrated by Lightning Max being able to kill one of the 3 crows who together amount to around town level, it's reasonable to think that Martial Gorilla will pose a threat to some of the 7 automatically. This monster will be capable of wounding nearly any of them with brute force, save for Homelander, so while this could certainly be a problem for most of them individually, with the 7 turning up on the scene together, this should be a simple win for the 7, considering they have Homelander who should be able to do it alone. However, I'd imagine the rest would struggle trying to harm the gorilla for a few minutes, with Queen Maeve likely getting some solid shots in while the rest serve as a distraction, until Homelander gets impatient and puts the monster monkey down. Stop, I hear you say. Let's give the monsters a numbers advantage for a change. This brings us to the Sea Folk, but without Deep Sea King. He's showing up later, don't worry. Or do worry, actually. Anyway, the Sea Folk are not messing around. They can range from wolf to tiger in overall threat, capable of squashing cars and lifting trucks. With waves of seawater gushing along the shoreline and several of these things showing up, can the 7 repel them? Homelander and Queen Maeve will be okay, with A-Train likely moving fast enough to not get touched. However, the rest may be in danger. Translucent won't be much help given he probably can't hurt any of these things. The Deep isn't going to be convincing these sea monsters to stop with his aquatic love whispers, since they'll be hell-bent on their massacre. And Starlight may do well offensively, but getting clocked could lead to trouble. Black Noir should also be able to get some work done, but his attack style will mean he'll have his hands full with one at a time. Overall, some of the 7 will be fine scrapping, whereas others will be in big trouble, and since the ones who will do well can't fight the others' battles for them, this becomes quite a challenge. I'm leaning between challenging and some die, but because most of the Sea Folk should be wolf level and not tiger, I'll set it in challenging, since some of them will be easily wiped through by Homelander, Maeve and Starlight, which in turn will let them provide assistance to the others. In another team battle, a dozen or so Subterraneans will be even tougher. These things are graded at disaster level tiger by the databook, and with their large size and increased numbers, it's like the Sea Folk, but worse. Putting the Subterranean King aside, a wave of Subterraneans are brutish, muscular beings with heavy force behind them, as seen by their corpses down in the Monster Association hideout. The goofier ones in episode 1 didn't look all that, but as we can see, not all Subterraneans are made the same. With that being said, since there are more of these and fighting on land is their preferred space compared to the Sea Folk, this fight will be meaner and grittier for the 7. Whereas the Sea Folk were challenging, I think the Subterraneans will push to some die tier. This is because they have more numbers and seem to thrive in coordinated attacks, even to the point of subduing Brave Giant for a time, who is an S-class invention. Translucent will either die or flee. A-Train may get caught out if he's not careful. The Deep is probably getting overwhelmed, and Starlight could have useful attacks but will likely run into problems if she loses charge. Black Noir might even struggle because at face value, the Subterraneans look less squishy than the Sea Folk, so piercing their bodies with his blades may take more honest work from him, which will slow him down. This is going to be a hard Homelander, Maeve, and maybe Starlight carry, but I think there'd be 2 or 3 casualties upon the weaker members in a very hard fought scrap against what will probably be around a dozen Subterraneans. Well, you're probably thinking if they got to some die tiering from the Subterraneans without the King, then they'd never beat a disaster level demon, right?
Wrong.
That's where Macho Daikon comes in. This overgrown radish was able to be defeated by the Surly brothers, who are a team of siblings representing A, B, and C class. This demon level monster, however, was only demon level in name, a monster incorrectly categorized as noted by Smileman. With an A-class hero delivering the final blow in what was a fairly routine battle, this would actually mean Macho Daikon would be light work for Homelander, putting this demon level threat in the simple tier for the 7. Of course, we know it's not really a demon level threat though, and is a tiger at best. Triple Tongues, a small group of monsters rated at tiger level, are a more recent threat from the manga. Whipping their tongues around with alarming speed which can cut and pierce, standing in front of them is going to give you a new outlook on the phrase of someone having a sharp tongue. Translucent may have time to shine here though. Obscuring himself from view, he could detain one of these from behind or force their mouth closed while Homelander, Maeve or Noir deliver a death blow. Challenging tier for Triple Tongues since they are going to be dangerous in numbers and could leave the 7 with a lot of cuts, but will be taken out due to their mindless nature and less durable main bodies. Destro Chloridium would be interesting. With his ability to drill into a host body and control them, his swift movement and small hitbox could prove irritating for the 7 to see coming, and it's likely he gets control of someone like Starlight or the Deep to turn them against the others. However, sooner or later, he'll be caught and squashed by Homelander, since at best, Destro Chloridium will just control someone who can't threaten the rest of the group, and he'll be caught in place trying to drill through a more durable member of the 7 since their skin is tough enough to not give him instant entry. Challenging, but more for being a nuisance than anything. Kombu Infinity, however, is a tiger threat not to be trifled with. It defeated 2 respectable A-class heroes at once in what seemed to be a fairly relaxed effort. With its tentacles being very fast and sharp, it will pose a threat to the majority of the 7, especially given the speed of its attacks are likely as fast as A-Train's or Homelander's. However, I believe it will come undone with the numbers game. Translucent may sneak up close to detain or leave Kombu open, Homelander's lasers and aerial attack will throw the monster off, as will Starlight's projectiles and constant approaches from A-Train, the Deep and Noir. In a one-on-one, Kombu Infinity probably defeats most of the 7. However, in a 7-on-1, this is a threat to humanity they should be able to clear with challenging difficulty since I think someone on the team is going to pay the price for the 7 to realize just how fatal this monster can be before they, overwhelm it. Up next is Mama S. Do S. Like I said the first 2 times. As a demon level threat, she is certainly not to be trifled with. She's more than capable of keeping up with heroes within the speeds of the 7, and she has a particularly worrying ability. Any who are struck by her whip become mind controlled and follow her orders. In theory, all Does needs to do is strike Homelander with her whip once, and the game is over. Or alternatively, strike the others to overwhelm the rest until it eventually presents an opportunity to strike Homelander too. You see, with her speed and skill, whipping any of these characters will not be an insurmountable obstacle. And in fact, outside of Homelander or A-Train, they'll all be struck rather easily considering her prowess and attack speed. However, as we know in One Punch Man, Fubuki was whipped by Do-S and yet did not succumb to her mind control, which suggests that people with extraordinary willpower may be able to withstand her mind control. Another explanation is that Fubuki actually resisted it due to having psychic powers, which is another reasonable deduction. If it's the latter, then any of the 7 can be mind controlled, which leads me to believe Do-S would ultimately win. If it's the former, then this comes down to whether you believe the 7, or Homelander most importantly, possesses a powerful level of willpower to resist mind control. Since Do-S is less a demon level monster solely on the basis of her physical power and more so due to her strong ability, I believe she lacks in the physical nature required to take on the entire 7 outright, which leads me to think that this fight goes one of 2 ways. If Homelander can repel the mind control through willpower, which some people will argue for and some against, then I believe the 7 can overwhelm her in a close fight. If Homelander cannot repel the mind control, then it probably means the rest are cooked by default, since even if 1 or 2 of the others can somehow repel Do-S, it won't matter much overall due to her own power and the control of the others. I'm putting this in either way tier, since if she can use her powers on them, it's a win for her through mind control, and if not, then a tough but winnable battle for the 7. Mosquito Girl is another very tricky battle for them, albeit one with more lethality attached. At first thought, I had intended to suggest that the Seven would lose to her individually, but should be able to scrape out a 7-on-1 victory to save the city. However, on closer thought, I realized something. Mosquito Girl does most of her attacks from the air, so in reality, it's more of a mix between a 2-on-1 from Homelander and Starlight who can fly, and a 5-on-1 from the rest who are all ground-based or have no effective means to attack Mosquito Girl in a way which would truly matter. And under these circumstances, it spells trouble more than initially thought. Mosquito Girl offers an insane amount of problems to deal with. Her mosquito swarms will be causing havoc everywhere, and while you can argue those mosquitoes will not bite through the Seven's bulletproof skin, they will be causing heavy distractions for the Seven to fend off while fighting her, as those mosquitoes will be attacking nearby civilians, forcing empathetic personalities like Starlight or Queen Maeve to break away from the main fight to try and assist innocents. Meanwhile, every attack from Mosquito Girl will be fatal. We've seen against Genos that she will rip through the body as a standard attack, slicing through Genos' explosion resistance body and tearing one of his arms clean off. This Genos is as or more durable than any of the Seven, with exception to perhaps Homelander, since he at minimum scales to town level through his explosions. So whoever gets hit by this attack will either die outright or be compromised to the point of not being useful in the fight any longer. This is a big deal because as a demon level threat, Mosquito Girl at the bare minimum is faster than most of the Seven, and possibly faster than A-Train or Homelander in direct combat. Anyone on ground level won't be able to attack Mosquito Girl effectively and will be swept through, and everything I've said so far only concerns her base form. Once the mass of mosquitoes brings her blood from nearby civilians, and she enters her metamorphosis state, all of the Seven will be killed by slashes, which are so strong they tear apart and obliterate entire buildings they didn't even make contact with, which is a far stronger show of outright force than anyone in The Boys has ever done visually. Any of these swipes will clean through the Seven, Homelander included, and this form makes her even faster than before, to where Genos at the time had no way to even react, meaning neither will the Seven, which tears her in The Seven Loses. This is a horrible matchup, since it splits the Seven up between land and air, while also endangering many civilians at once to further distract them, worsened by the fact that they'll likely die or become incapacitated after a single attack from a monster who is not only faster, but incredibly ruthless in her approach. And all before even mentioning her transformation. And losing to Mosquito Girl, as you can imagine, doesn't bode well for the Seven in matchups including more dangerous monsters such as the Deep Sea King. Once we reach this level of power, monsters can scale from city to mountain level with massively hypersonic speeds that would even see the likes of Homelander as slow in comparison. It's not worth bringing up the likes of Carnage Kabuto, Beefcake, or Vaccine Man when the Seven would be dominated by a middling demon level threat like the Ruler of the Seas. Extremely concentrated firepower from Genos, which blew through a missile shelter and several buildings after directly hitting Deep Sea King, wasn't even enough to take him down, and he came back within moments, already at full power. This is a Genos significantly stronger than the town level Genos who fought Mosquito Girl, meaning Homelander's lasers will only tickle him and his punches will feel lightweight to the monster, which also means Starlight's energy or Maeve's punches will be near useless by comparison. Deep Sea King's punches blow through reinforced bomb shelters like paper, and he'd swat away the majority of the Seven with the greatest of ease without even needing his hydrated form. He's proven to fight faster than anyone within the Seven by nearly catching Sonic and keeping up with Genos in exchanges beyond anything shown from even Homelander, and his terrifying aura might make even the Deep switch sides mid-fight, since he'd realize he's effectively looking at the Seafolk version of Homelander, but on anime PEDs. To put it bluntly, Deep Sea King is stronger, faster, meaner, more durable, and better at fighting than any of the Seven, and he can regenerate from fierce wounds immediately. Any threat reflective of the Deep Sea King, such as the Subterranean King, is a step too far for the Seven to defeat if they were to ever appear in the world of the Boys. None of them can harm him meaningfully, none can evade him, and all would be in severe trouble if hit by him. At best, the Seven flee for their lives, since A-Train and Homelander would be able to escape long distance if not within arm's reach of Deep Sea King, and at worst, they perish if they fight to the end. So the Seven loses once we enter the realm of city scale and above demon level threats who operate at higher combat speeds. As you can see, I focused more on the monster threats that the Seven could deal with, since that's more interesting than telling you over and over again how they lose to pretty much any notable monster who fights S-class heroes. All in all, the Seven can protect their world from the lower tier monsters of One Punch Man if they materialized. Although, once demon level threats start to become involved, well, it's time to run the other way, like A-Train. Like the video, leave your thoughts, become a channel member for as little as 99 cents, and check out some more videos either way.